Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk, Marketizing and Localizing Your E-commerce Site. My name is Evan, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of corporation, and by participating in the session using Microsoft Teams, your name, email address, phone number, and/or title may be viewable by other session participants. Do not consent to being a part of the session. Please disconnect at this time. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the event in the Q&A panel, and we will have some time at the end of the event to speak to any questions as well. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Now let's get started. Presenting for today from Microsoft, we have Stuart Hargreaves, Program Manager 2. Stuart, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Evan. So welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's Tech Talk. Today I will be talking about the capabilities in Dynamics 365 Commerce for marketizing and localizing an e-commerce site. I'll explain more what those terms mean in terms of this particular discussion in a minute. Part of today's Tech Talk will be kind of a walkthrough of what the capabilities are in Dynamics 365 Commerce, and then the other part will be a demonstration of those capabilities in Dynamics 365 Headquarters and Site Builder as well. So specifically, the things I want to cover today are the capabilities that Dynamics offers for marketization and localization. I would like to explain and demonstrate how to actually add languages to a e-commerce site, and I will also be talking about how a channel is configured in Site Builder as well to extend the marketization capabilities. And then the latter half of today will be a walkthrough of the localization features of e-commerce Site Builder, and a demonstration of how we export content, localize it, and import it back into Site Builder. So a couple of notes about terminology. I use the term marketization or marketize to describe changes or features of a website that are around products, product assortments, categories, pricing, price groups, unique delivery options, even layout, styles, templating, things like that. So typically, we talk about marketization in terms of one of a couple of dimensions or both. One would be a brand. So if for example, you have a site that hosts multiple brands, you can use what we call an online channel to differentiate or separate those brands and separate the products and the categories and whatnot. And also, if your website supports multiple regions or countries, let's say, you can also use channels to create unique experiences for your customers in those specific countries or markets. And so that's essentially what I mean by marketization. And then I use the term localization to refer to the language of the content that your customer sees in your e-commerce site. So an important thing to distinguish is that within a market you can have one or more languages. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. Yeah, why don't we actually jump to the next slide? And so conceptually speaking, this is how I might diagram an e-commerce site that supports multiple markets and multiple languages, right? So in this particular example, what we have is a business called Fabricam Incorporated, I guess. That business happens to have an e-commerce site, and that e-commerce site serves customers in a default market, or like assumably probably the American market, since it's ENUS is the language we're using, and also the Canadian market. And so what's important to note here is that each of the experiences that your customers will see, whether it be the channel or the language, is determined by the URL that they request. So for example, customers who request fabricam.com will see products and prices and delivery options, etc., for the Fabricam Incorporated channel, and they will see it in the ENUS language. Now, I'll show you in the next slide how that mapping works, but for now, just assume that that's the way this mapping is set up. And similarly, for customers who hit the fabricam.ca/ENCA URL, they'll see the products and assortments and categories for the Fabricam Canada channel, and they'll see it in Canadian English. Okay. Now, and the important thing to note here is that a single e-commerce site can host the experiences for all those channels and languages. E-commerce site builder is really designed to be able to provide maximum reuse of content and templates and pages and fragments to minimize the amount of duplication you need to do in order to stand up these different marketized and localized experiences for your customers. So jumping to the next slide. This is a representation of what you'll see in Site Builder, and we'll look at that experience in a few minutes. So what's important to note here is that each one of these rows represents for lack of a better term, a unique customer experience. And so, like I said in the previous slide, what we have is the fabricam.com URL, and that's really a combination of a domain, fabricam.com, and a path. In this case, it's basically the empty path, or the null path. And so basically, when you hit fabricam.com, what will come back to that customer is the Fabricam Incorporated channel and the ENUS language, right? And similar, and et cetera, down the list, right? And so I'm calling out the importance of this particular concept because it is really the heart of the functionality of marketization and localization in Dynamics 365 Commerce is really driven by the URL itself. And the URL is defined by the customer, both the domain and the path, right? And it is a unique combination of that domain and path that maps to a unique combination of the channel and the language. Okay. So let's see. Why don't we jump into an actual demo or a sort of high-level explanation of where we do this configuration work, and then we'll actually run through an example where we do that demo itself. So I break down the process of marketization and localization into two high-level steps. The first step is really what we're talking about, what we're looking at now, which is configuration. And then later on, we'll actually do the localization step. And so within configuration, there's actually two sub-steps, if you will. The first would be to add languages to your channel in headquarters. And the second would be to associate an additional language to that channel in Site Builder. And then there's actually kind of a step 3, if we would prefer, if we want as well, which is to add a new channel to Site Builder as well, and then optionally add additional languages to that channel. Okay. So in step 1 here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to Dynamics headquarters, and we're going to add a language to a channel. So I am right here. I am in Dynamics 365 Commerce headquarters. I will go to the online channels view here by selecting online store, and then I'll open up this particular online channel called AW2. And what we have now is we see a list of the languages that have already been associated with this channel. Now, to add a new language, I simply click Add, and I'm going to add Simplified Chinese, and I'll hit Save. And that's all I need to do in the channel. Now, in order to make this language that I've added here visible in Site Builder, what I actually have to do is run a job. And so if I go to distribution schedule and I select job number 1070, which is channel configuration, I will run it. And then that one's been batched. And then what I tend to do is I look in my download sessions to make sure that that job was actually queued up. And let's see. Yep, this job, it looks like it has been applied, which is good. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll jump over to Site Builder. And so what we're looking at here is we're looking at this is the AW2 site in Site Builder. In this particular environment, we have 6 sites. I'm looking at the AW2 site. And before I jump into the channel configuration experience, I want to point out that what we have, this is an important aspect of the marketization and localization story in Site Builder, is this particular control up here, which we usually call it the channel and locale picker, or channel and language picker, whatever you prefer. And what you'll see here is that what we have is we have a drop down for channel, and we have 2 channels configured currently, and then within the AW2 channel we have a single language. There's a single language mapped to that channel. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go and map an additional language to that channel. And we do that by going into site settings, and then within site settings we open channels. So as you can see here, this is really a different view of what we just saw, which is that for the AW2 channel we have a single language, ENUS, and we have a URL, and it's mapped to the URL fabricam.com/AW2. So in order to add another language, we just select the name of the channel, we go over and we say add a locale, and there are all the languages that can be added. It looks like so if anybody who was paying attention, they'll notice that this one didn't happen to be in Commerce headquarters when we are configuring it, and that is by design. The way headquarters works is you can add languages and then you publish them, or you push them out to your scale unit, and then Site Builder consumes them and then caches them, or basically persists them from there. And if you remove a language from headquarters, it will not be removed in Site Builder, because there is a very real possibility that Site Builder has taken a dependency upon that language, and there are page variants that have been built against that language, and so basically it's a one-way trip. And so it is. So again, it is entirely possible to have languages in Site Builder that have been removed from headquarters. So I'm going to add the ES language, Spanish, and then I'm going to create a unique URL for this particular combination of channel and language. I'm going to say this is AW2/ES. Now, and as you can see, what I've done is I've actually created it right here, right? So one thing I want to point out is that the path that you're defining here, basically what you're doing is you're creating a unique combination, you're creating a URL that is unique across your tenant, right? So what that means is that nowhere else in your tenant can you have a URL called fabricam.com/aw2/es. And similarly, I'm not allowed to create a path that matches something else that's already been created. And so you might be asking why I didn't just do that, right? fabricam.com/es. Well, that particular URL has already been created in a different site in this tenant. And so I would get an error if I attempted to set that up in this particular site. So I will say OK, and then I will hit save and publish. And now when I go back to the pages view and I look up at the channel and locale picker again, what I'll see is I have a second language here to develop content in. Now, as of now, no content has been developed for the Spanish language for this particular channel. And if I actually change to that language, what you'll see is it's empty. Now, what that means is that we need to actually create what we call page variants that are particular to this channel and language. And so I will actually show you how to do that in a few minutes through localization. One other thing I wanted to demonstrate was how to add an additional channel to a site. And so that's where you click the Add a Channel button, and then you now have the ability to choose from the available online stores or online channels in headquarters. And so what I'll do is I'll select Fabricam Extended Online Store, and then within each channel you see a list of the languages that have been published through headquarters. And so I'm going to select Simplified Chinese here, and so I'll say AW2/H. And so and by doing that, I've actually created a new channel, right? And that channel, and so anybody who makes the request to fabricam.com/aw2/zhhans will see we'll see the site in using the Fabricam Extended Online Store channel and Simplified Chinese as the language, assuming that I've localized it, right? Okay, so why don't I hit save and publish again? And just to verify, I'll jump back to the pages view, and yeah, there's my new channel, and there's my new language, and unsurprisingly, there's no content for that channel or language either. So why don't I'll jump back to AW2. Okay, and so that's a quick demo of how you add a channel to a site in Site Builder. Let's see. So okay, this is actually the demonstration of what I just showed you the demo of what of this particular slide, and so I bound a channel to an e-commerce site, and I did associate a language to a channel. So at this point, let's move into the process for localizing e-commerce site content. So a discussion of localization always needs to start with the mechanism or the file format that you're using for localizing your sites. Dynamics 365 Commerce Site Builder uses the XLIF file format for exporting and importing localized content. XLIF is industry standard industry standard XML schema, and I'll show you some of the details of that particular schema in a minute, because we'll actually create a localized XLIF file. There's also a link in this particular deck which you will have available to you that points you at if you need to understand more about the XLIF specification, it's all in there. Let's see. So let's talk for a minute about what localization in Site Builder looks like. Within Site Builder, there are three types of assets that can be localized directly in Site Builder. There are pages, there are fragments, and there are media assets. At the end of this particular deck, there is actually there's a link to an excellent document that describes the Site Builder page model, and then it explains how fragments and pages and media assets work. So I won't go into that here, but again, these are all assets that can be localized directly in Site Builder. In addition, there are modules and there are products that can get localized content. Now, for the localization of a module file is a slightly different process. And so there's a link there to learn how to localize a module. And similarly, products, like for instance, product names or product descriptions, those also product content also follows a different localization process, and I've also linked to that information here. And that's not something we'll be covering today. So part two of marketization and localization is the actual export and import of XLIF data. So why don't we jump into a demo of how that works? So the first part is around what do I need to do to export an XLIF file so that it can be localized. So what why don't I just go ahead and rather than walking you through the slide, why don't I just demo what that experience looked like? So in this particular site, I only have 3 pages in here, and I'm going to open the home page, and I'll export the localization. You do that right here with the export XLIF option from the localization tab. One thing I want to point out is that if you're editing the page, you're prevented from exporting it, your localization, and so make sure that you are not editing. So as you can see, the localization tab disappears there. So make sure that you're not editing the page when you want to localize, and then we'll do export XLIF. And what happens is an XML file, actually with the XLF file extension, gets downloaded by your browser to your file system. And so why don't we jump over there and take a look at what just got downloaded. So there is our XLIF document, and I'll open that in Visual Studio. Okay, so here's an exported XLIF. What I will do, rather than walk you through the tedium of actually localizing this, I actually have I have a script that'll transform this into a localized version for me. But what I'll do is I'll call out the important aspects of this document. What you see here is there's a source language attribute on the file element. We will need to add a target language attribute as well that will be the language that we're localizing the content into. And then the other thing that we will be doing is for every source element in the document, we will be creating a target element sibling that contains the localized content for the source. And so rather than me doing that manually because it's tedious and it's error prone, I'm going to do that with a quick script. And let's see. Yep. Okay. So basically all I'm doing here is I'm running an XSL transform over it, and I'm exporting that as a new file. So let's grab that. There it is. And we'll open that in Visual Studio real quick just to look at what I did to it. Okay. So as I said, there's now a target language attribute. And for every source element, there's a target element. Now, I did not actually localize the content. All I did here is I actually added a little prefix or a little kind of moniker, if you will, on the front of the content so that we can see that it was localized when we import it back in. Again, this is not something you have to do. If my Spanish was any good, I would be able to, I would be able to localize this myself, but instead all I'm doing is I'm putting a little kind of a tagged placeholder in there so that we can actually visually see that we actually imported some localization. Okay, so why don't we jump back? So now that that's transformed into a localized version, why don't we jump back here? And what we'll do, actually, let me just to keep us current with the deck. This is step 2. Around localization, I did just call this out, the fact that we're actually putting a target language attribute in there and we're putting a target element sibling into the document for every source, right? One other thing I should point out is that this manual process of localizing XLIFs is really, most of our customers actually work with a localization vendor to localize their files. So there's any number of vendors out there that will take that work with XLIF files, and it will take your source XLIF files and will localize them into the languages that you need, so you can re-import them back in. Okay, so now we're on to step 3, which is importing the XLIF. And so rather than walking you through the steps here, I'm just going to show you how it works. So the first thing we need to do, and this is important, we are currently in the language that we exported from. And so what we need to do is actually switch to the language where we just localized into. And so I'll select ES for Spanish. And as you can see, we don't, there's nothing there. Now, at this point, we have 2 options. One, we can create what's called a page variant or a localized variant. And what that does is actually creates an instance of this page in this language, but it doesn't pull any content in. And so what that allows you to do is it allows you to customize the page for this particular language or market, if you will, without pulling content from the source page, right? So basically, this allows you to completely change the anything about the page that you would like. I mean, whether it be the template or the layout or the modules that it uses or the content it contains, you can actually create a brand new version of this page. But what we're going to do, and I think what most people will do, is they'll actually import the XLIF that we localized, and then and by doing so, all of the structure from the source page comes across, and then what we see here now in the preview is that you can see the ES prefix on all this content, which indicates that we're actually looking at localized content, even though it wasn't in fact localized. One thing I would like to point out, and this is important, is that what we're not seeing, I'm going to jump back to the source version. And as you can see, the source version actually has a header in it. Now, that header happens to be a fragment, and this is you can see that this is the indicator that what we're actually including in this page is a fragment, and a fragment, just as a quick primer, is a piece of reusable content. It's basically a fully formed module that has content already in it. And a fragment lets you reuse content across multiple pages, and so that makes perfect sense for a header or a footer. And so the reason that you're not seeing that header in this page is because the header itself has not yet been localized. Okay, so why don't we, just to walk through the process one more time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the header fragment, and I'm going to export I'm going to export an XLIF for the header as well, right? And so that just got downloaded, and yep. So it downloaded an XLIF called header container. What I will do is I will run that same transform over. Let's see, do I have? Yep, there it is. So what I'll do is I just ran that transform. Let's just quickly verify that what we got was what we expected. Oops, wrong document. There we go. Yep, and so we have a target language. We have target elements for every one of our source elements, just like before. So why don't we import that back in? And again, just like before, before we can import a localized XLIF file, we need to actually switch to the language that we're importing for. So hit save, and again, we don't see anything here. If you're curious, this is what it looks like to create a page variant. All it does is it actually creates an empty page from which you can actually start developing structure and modules and containers and things like that. But instead, here we'll hit finish editing to check it in. Localization, we'll import that XLIF file. There's our localized header container XLIF. File was successfully imported, and now we actually have an imported. We've imported the XLIF. So now why don't we jump back to the page we just localized, and we're still in Spanish, which is good. So we'll go to the Spanish version of the home page, and what you'll see is that now you'll see there's the display for the header. Now, what I also want to point out is that this header, let's see, why don't I show you in the ENUS version, is, oops, change. This header actually has a logo in it that you're not seeing in the localized version. And the reason for that is that just like fragments, media assets like images are also reusable assets and also contain localizable content that needs to be localized. And so if we go over to our media library and we find this particular asset, I wonder why that's not rendering.
Check your locale.
Oh, thank you. Good eye. Yes, that is by design. There we go. Okay, so here's our AdventureWorks image, and just like page and fragment assets, we can export an XLIF. Good. We can go find that XLIF and localize it. Here we go. Take a look at that. This one is easy. I'm probably just going to do it manually since it's yes. All right, and then let's re-import this back in. Oh, I did. Well, that's fine. Let's just do this. Import XLIF. It is that file that I just saved changes to. Import failed due to an error. Okay. I ran into this last time. Let's see if we have localized content in here. Oh,
change your locale.
Yep, thank you. I made the same mistake twice. Import. Okay. That's better. Okay, now what we should see if we look down into the metadata, we have, yeah, you can see that the alt text has an ES prefix on it. So does the title. Excellent. So now why don't we just quickly jump back to our page here. Now we're already in the ES language for the home page, and we should actually see that localized image get rendered for us. There it is. Okay. So that is a quick walkthrough of how we localize content for within a particular channel. Now, it is also possible to create localized variants across channels. And so, like we've been working within the AW2 channel this whole time. And as you can see, if we go to the AW3 channel, we've got a couple languages, and we also have the Fabricant Online Store channel with a single language. Now, why don't we try to create a new language for the AW3 channel. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch just to verify there's nothing here. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to create a page variant, and yeah, and we have an empty page variant there. Fine. And then what I'm going to attempt to do is import localization for the ENCA language. And so what I'll do is run. So let's see, that's the home page again. Oops. Home page, and then this time ENCA. Oh. And then let me change this to ENCA as well. Okay. Yep, so now I have my homepage, my localized homepage for ENCA. Just to verify here. Great, okay. And now I will attempt to import localization for this. Yeah. Okay, so just like in the morning session, I'm getting an error when I try to import that localized file. This is something that should work, and I will need to figure out why our demo environment's not allowing me to import an XLIF across channels. But this is the mechanism that allows you to create localized variants across channels. We also have a feature called cross-channel sharing, which I'm not going to demo for you today, but in the deck itself, let me point out there is a yeah, so there is a help document called cross-channel sharing, and just a brief overview of what cross-channel sharing provides. What it allows you to do is to create a default channel that that becomes sort of the default experience for everybody who isn't requesting content for a more specific channel. So basically, what it allows you to do is create a channel for all experiences, and then you can override those experiences in specific channels. And so I would encourage you to take a look at the cross-channel sharing document, because it does actually provide some optimizations for sites that are mostly the same experience and just have a couple of exceptions in various various channels. So with that, that concludes the demo of marketization and localization for e-commerce sites. I am happy to take some questions right now, and yeah, why don't we jump to any questions that may have come up.
So nobody has submitted any questions, but I've got a couple kind of in the backlog that I want to pull out. And one of the questions we had in an earlier session was around, can I do this in bulk? Can I, if I have multiple pages and fragments, can I export these XLIF files in bulk, and can I import them in bulk?
Yes, okay, that's a great question. So the answer to that is if you are working directly in e-commerce site builder, the answer would be no, we don't actually provide a mechanism within the UI itself to do this in bulk. Every every page, every fragment, every asset needs to have an XLIF exported for that page or fragment or asset, and localized and then re-imported. Now, everything that you can do in Site Builder is actually can be programmatically done through APIs. What I will do is I will provide the link to the API documentation that allows you to write a customization or a script that will actually do this in bulk. And then there is also work in our backlog that's, I think, is going to be happening in the next couple of releases to create a connector. I think it's a Power Platform connector that allows you to use Power Platform to do that for you and to simplify that process. I will make sure that those links are included in this particular deck on the additional resources page, so that you have that information.
And one more question. For a single asset, like a page or an image or a fragment, is it possible to have multiple locales in a single XML file?
No, it's not. So what you'll need to do is when you export the XLIF for what I would call your base language or the language that you develop your site in, you will create a localized XLIF for every language that you're localizing that page into. Yeah, that's so yeah, there will be an XLIF for every language you're localizing into.
Thank you. No more questions.
Okay, excellent.
And with that, I'll turn it back over to Evan to wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. We would like to get your feedback on today's session. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We value your feedback and welcome your input on how we did today and what you would like to see in future sessions. That survey scores on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible, and we thank you for your participation in that. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenter, Stuart, and a thank you to our audience for logging in and joining us today. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.